Olá, tudo bem? I'm Emma from Portuguese Language Lessons. In this short video, I'm going to talk you through the imperativo, the imperative in Portuguese. Okay, so here's a worksheet that I'm going to use to help explain this. So the imperative is the verb form that we use to give orders, advice, and make requests. If we're a native English speaker, we're often really not very clear about this because it's so very simple in English. So, for example, rather than saying he does this, where I've got the verb in the form does to match the person who does it, he, or we study Portuguese, where the verb study is in the form to match we study. It's saying things like do this, study Portuguese. Okay, so I'm not describing an action, I'm not saying what someone is doing or did, I'm giving an order. Okay, I do not have a person before the verb. Okay, so because in English it's so very simple, we don't change the verb at all. We really need to think a little bit, if we're coming from English, about what we're doing when we're using the imperative. Okay, now Portuguese is more complicated than English because here we're dealing with a verb, so we've got to take into account whether we're addressing someone formally or informally, and whether we're addressing one or more than one person. Okay, in Portuguese all of our verbs change to take into account exactly who we're talking to, okay, who we're considering. So you hear this a lot when you're out and about. Have you heard people say diga, faça favor, ponha aqui, etc. So normally we're being polite when we're out and about, so we might see or read often instructions or in the imperativo, tome este medicamento todos os dias. Take this medication every day. Okay. So how do I make this tom? So this is coming from the root verb tomar. And so thinking about how I change it in the present tense, I go tomo, tomos, toma, tomamos, tomo. And I make tom by taking that first form, tomu, I cut off the O and I add an E. So all of the verbs that in their root form end in AR, remember that's nearly all of the verbs, we switch that AR for an E. Another example, faça uma lista de todos os seus comprimidos. Make a list of all your tablets. So faça comes from the verb fazer. And so how do I conjugate this in the present? Faço, fazes, faz, fazemos, fazem. I'm interested here in faço. So to make faça, I take faço and I cut off the O and I replace that with an A. So all of the ER and IR verbs add an A to. And it's worth remembering that all of the irregular verbs fall in the ER and IR verb category. So if you've got an irregular verb, it must have an A on the end to be the formal imperativo. So a little summary here. To make formal orders, we take the first person singular of the verb. Not always the infinitive, the common verbs are irregular. However, if I'm dealing with a regular verb, it's the same. I take off the O, add an E for the AR verbs, so that's the regular verbs, and add an A for the ER and IR verbs, so that is the irregular verbs. Okay. There are so the verbs here, this is what we call regular imperativo. Okay, so all of the verbs in this, these are most of the verbs, they do something very predictable. Okay, so even the verbs we call irregular verbs like fazer are regular in the imperativo because we work from the first person and we switch the endings. Okay, and here I've put in a box, there are 4 irregular verbs, and these are truly irregular verbs in the imperativo. They've got their special irregular imperativo form, they don't follow the pattern I've just explained. The ser becomes seja, estar, esteja, dar, de, ir, vá. Okay, So these are ones that you have to memorize. You see this a lot. Seja bem-vindo when you're out and about, and you'll hear the others as well. Now, if I'm going to be talking to close friends and children, i.e. using the informal, look at these examples. Olha, look. So this is from the verb olhar. And how am I forming this? Olha, olhas, olha. Olhamos, olham. It's the third person. So this is somebody who I'd normally address in the second person. Olhas. But to make the imperativo, I use the third person. Olha. Faz assim. Do it like this. Faz comes from fazer. And where is this coming from? Faço, fazes, faz. The third person. Fazemos, fazem. So, to give an order to child, friend, or member of your family, the informal, we just use the third person singular of the verb. Okay. Okay then. Now we've got to think about talking to more than one person. So happily, in the plural, we've got no difference between formal and informal. We use the same form. Okay, so this is good news. And this is very similar to the first set of, the first pattern I was talking about. So we use the first person singular, we take off the O, and this time we're adding EM for the AR verbs and AM for the ER and IR verbs. Okay, so that's quite predictable, putting an M on the end here. Okay, so I've put together a little summary table. Some people like it, some people don't. So for AR verbs, we're always using the present simple as our base form, and it's either going to be the eu form, cutting off the O, or the L form, the third person. If I'm being formal, I would say fal with an E, or fala, just the straight third person form, or falem for the plural. For the ER and IR verbs, for example, faço, venho, faz, vem. Here we end up with faça, venha, faz, vem, façam, venham. Okay. Okay. If you're not somebody who likes to follow these patterns and rules, that's fine. You can just learn the different forms. So there's 3 different forms to learn. So for example, for the verb fazer, you can learn fazer has got faço, faz, façam. For the verb vir, you've got venha, vem, venham. Okay, so if you're finding it a lot to try and do all this working out in your head, and it is a lot, just learn the forms. That's absolutely fine. And you can use these rules as a bit of a backup if you're not sure, if you're thinking, oh, is it really that? And then you can go through the rules to help you. A few examples here. Precisa de ajuda, mãe? Põe a mesa se fazes favor. So, lay the table, please. So here we're using the informal. Vamos ao supermercado. Queres alguma coisa? Comprem pão e leite. So here I've got the plural form. Comprei. Okay, you see this a lot and hear it a lot when you're out and about, especially for instructions. So instructions on the back of any packet, recipes, and anything like that will have this this imperativo. Okay. Now, in the negative, you've got to be careful with the informal, as this has a different form and it's based on the formal form. Okay, so look at these examples. So for fala, we say não fales, faz, não faças, vem, não venhas. So, so for the informal, in the negative, we take the formal form and add an S. Okay, and if I'm going to compare it to the formal, fal, não fal, faça, não faça, venha, não venha. It's a lot easier, isn't it? And even the plural, falem, não falem, or façam, não façam. and venha, não venham. Okay, I hope that's been useful for you. Any questions, do get in touch. Okay, ciao ciao!